Ma'am, this section is reserved. The words cut through the calm hum of boarding passengers as the white flight attendant, dressed in a pressed navy blue uniform, stepped into the aisle. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest, and her voice held no warmth. The comment was directed at a black pregnant woman, visibly in her third trimester, standing just past the curtain that separated the premium economy section. She wore a cream-colored maternity dress, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Her natural curly hair was softly tied back, and a small bag hung at her side. "I'm in 12A, the woman replied gently, offering her boarding pass. The attendant, Cynthia, as her name badge read, barely glanced at it. "This section is for elite or upgraded passengers only. You must have made a mistake. Please move back." The pregnant woman blinked, calm but clearly uncomfortable. "I booked and paid for this seat," she said, her tone polite but steady. "I'd like to sit down." Cynthia didn't move. "You'll have to wait. We'll check it once boarding finishes." Behind her, a white businessman in a navy suit approached. Without hesitation, Cynthia smiled and stepped aside, allowing him to pass without even checking his ticket. The woman, still standing, stepped slightly to the side, her lower back aching. She wasn't loud. She didn't argue. But she could feel the stares. The air grew heavier with every second she stood there, dismissed and made to feel like she didn't belong. She had felt this before, in stores, in boardrooms, in waiting rooms. The polite tones, the sideways glances, the subtle challenge to her presence. It always sounded the same, "Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" And yet, she stood tall. One hand on her bump. One breath at a time. What she didn't see, what Cynthia didn't realize either, was that from seat 1A, a man in a tailored charcoal suit had just looked up from his laptop. He had heard the exchange. He had seen the dismissal. And he knew the woman better than anyone. Because the pregnant woman standing quietly in row 12, was his wife. And he owned the airline. The aisle had cleared, and the plane was nearly full. The black pregnant woman, now seated in 12A by the window, gently adjusted her seatbelt over her belly. Her back ached, and her feet throbbed, but she remained composed. She didn't want sympathy, just the comfort and respect she'd paid for. The flight was still on the tarmac when the same white flight attendant, Cynthia, returned. This time, she was holding a tablet and a forced smile that barely masked her irritation. "I just rechecked the system," she said curtly, standing in the aisle with her arms crossed again. "You weren't supposed to be assigned this seat. It looks like a glitch. You'll need to move to the back." The woman looked up slowly, trying to remain calm. "Ma'am, I booked this seat myself through the airline site. I paid extra for the legroom. I'm 8 months pregnant." Cynthia's voice sharpened. "You're not on the upgrade list, and this area is for priority flyers. I need you to get up so the seat can be reassigned." Passengers nearby began to shift in their seats, listening but pretending not to. A couple across the aisle looked at each other, brows furrowed. "I'm not moving," the woman said quietly, voice steady. "I'm in the right seat, and I have every right to be here." Cynthia let out a frustrated sigh, glanced around, and leaned in closer. "You people always make everything difficult." The words hit harder than any slap could. The pregnant woman's expression faltered for a moment, but she didn't react. She couldn't. Her heart pounded, not out of fear, but out of restraint. She placed both hands protectively over her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the weight of those words. And then, without warning, Cynthia slapped the tray table closed in front of her with a loud snap, making several passengers jump. "Fine. You want to stay? Sit there and act entitled. Don't expect any special treatment." The woman didn't speak. Her silence was heavy, deliberate. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. But in that moment, everyone watching knew something was very wrong. And from the front of the plane, seat 1A, the man in the charcoal suit was already standing up. From seat 1A, the black man in the charcoal gray suit had been watching the entire exchange unfold. He hadn't moved earlier, not out of hesitation, but out of disbelief. He had hoped the situation would resolve on its own. That someone else, another crew member, a supervisor, a passenger, would step in and do the right thing. But no one did. And now, he couldn't stay seated any longer. He stood slowly, folding his laptop closed with controlled precision. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between disappointment and fury. As he stepped into the aisle, the chatter of passengers seemed to quiet with every step he took. His polished shoes moved down the narrow space between seats, his eyes fixed on row 12. The black pregnant woman, seated in 12A, was still staring out the window, her face calm but pale. One hand was pressed to her belly, the other rested on her tray table, still trembling slightly from the force Cynthia had used to slam it shut. As the man reached her row, Cynthia, the white flight attendant in the navy blue uniform, turned to see him approaching. She immediately straightened up, her eyes narrowing in confusion. "Sir, if you could return to your seat, this is a sensitive situation." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked down at his wife, his eyes softening only for her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. The woman nodded faintly. "I'm okay," she whispered. "But I need you to be calm." He turned slowly to Cynthia. His voice was low, deliberate. "This woman is my wife." Cynthia blinked, taking a step back. I didn't realize." "That much is obvious," he interrupted. "Because you assumed she didn't belong in this seat. You spoke to her with contempt, and you embarrassed her in front of a cabin full of strangers. All while wearing the uniform of an airline I built from the ground up." Cynthia's face went white. The passengers who had remained quiet were now hanging on to every word. Without raising his voice, he reached into his blazer and pulled out a sleek black executive badge, the gold logo unmistakable. North Point Air, founder and CEO. The silence that followed was deafening. Cynthia stared at the executive badge in stunned silence, her face drained of color. For a moment, the entire cabin stood still, seatbelt signs forgotten, whispers frozen mid-air. The black man in the charcoal suit, still standing calmly in the aisle, looked her square in the eyes. "You didn't ask her name. You didn't check her ticket properly. You didn't even look at her, you saw her skin, and you made a decision." "I'm sorry," Cynthia stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to." He raised a hand, cutting her off, not harshly, but with finality. "You didn't mean for me to be here. You didn't mean for anyone to notice. But what you did meant everything. It meant that a black woman, 8 months pregnant, wasn't worthy of basic respect in your eyes." The black pregnant woman, seated just to his side, remained quiet, her hands resting calmly on her belly. Her composure hadn't wavered, but now there was a light in her eyes, not anger, but dignity. A younger flight attendant approached nervously from the rear. "Sir, is everything all right?" "No," he replied. "But it will be." He turned back to Cynthia. "You are relieved of duty for this flight. You'll remain in the crew quarters until we land." Passengers began to murmur. Some recorded silently with phones now lifted just above their tray tables. Others just stared, as though watching something more than a confrontation. Something long overdue. Cynthia didn't argue. She simply turned and walked toward the back, her steps stiff, her face burning. The CEO didn't gloat. He didn't make a speech. He sat beside his wife, taking her hand in his. She squeezed back gently, her eyes still forward. After a pause, he whispered, "You didn't deserve any of that." She nodded. But I wasn't alone. And that, more than anything, was the quiet victory. There would be paperwork later. Meetings. Headlines, maybe. But in this moment, there was only silence. And sometimes, the silence after injustice is where the real shift begins. The wheels touched down at JFK with a soft jolt. Seatbelt signs chimed off, and passengers began to stir, but there was no rush this time. People stayed seated, waiting, not just out of courtesy, but because they sensed they had witnessed something that deserved respect. The black pregnant woman remained in her seat, still holding her husband's hand. She looked out the window, her reflection faint in the morning light. What had started as another instance of casual humiliation had ended in something rare, accountability in real time. The black man in the charcoal gray suit, still calm and composed, stood first. He helped his wife to her feet carefully, adjusting her bag over her shoulder. She moved slowly, not from pain, but with the deliberate grace of someone who had chosen dignity over confrontation. As they stepped off the plane, a young crew member stood by the exit. "Ma'am, sir. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened." "Truly." The pregnant woman gave a small nod. "Thank you for saying that." Outside the gate, an airline executive stood waiting, already briefed mid-flight. No press, no noise, just quiet acknowledgement. He nodded respectfully as the couple passed, not stopping them, not asking for anything. Cynthia, the white flight attendant in the Navy uniform, was nowhere to be seen. She had been escorted off the plane through the side service doors, a silent exit, far from the passengers whose respect she had lost. There was no media coverage that day. No angry online post. No lawsuit filed. Instead, within 48 hours, North Point Air launched a company-wide initiative. Every seat matters. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was a promise, one that came from the very top. Mandatory equity and bias training. New passenger resolution protocols. And a firm reminder that professionalism begins with basic human decency. As for the couple, they went home quietly. No headlines. No revenge. Just a renewed understanding of what it meant to stand firm without raising your voice. Because not all power is loud. Sometimes, the most powerful message is this. We see you. We remember. And we won't stay silent. And that message had already taken flight.